started, yes. Okay, this is for later, hopefully. I think we'll actually finish Lanval fairly quickly. We left off with, so the queen throws herself at Lanval. He denies her. He mentions his lover. And then he just kind of lays everything out on the table and says the lowest of her handmaidens is more beautiful, more wonderful, more moral, all those kinds of things than you are. She runs away crying. She tells Arthur. Arthur has difficulty believing it, but he orders, Lanval to be brought to him and says, if he can't prove it, he's going to die. And we're told, 3:28, he will have him burnt or hanged. Okay? So, meanwhile, we're told, sorrow has Lanval enough. Lanval has sorrow enough. Why? As soon as he tells Guinevere, he knows he's broken the deal. He knows he's violated one of those. I'm going to say something, but I don't want it to be misconstrued. He's violated one of those rules of courtly love. Here's the part I don't want to be misconstrued. He's not in the courtly love tradition. Okay? But it is still one of those rules of courtly love. Why? What did the lady say to him when she, not Guinevere, the fairy lady? You can't tell anybody. That's like at the top of those rules of courtly love, which is why this poem is often included in courtly love tradition. Okay? But it's not. This is totally other than that. One big reason. She's not married. The fairy lady, queen, whatever you want to call her, she's not married. Okay? That's a central tenet. T-E-N-E-T. It's not, little pet peeve. Journalists, when they say, talk about some belief system's tenets, they almost always, like 95%. Tenants. That's somebody who rents someplace. This is a principle of something, okay? One of the very top principles of the courtly love tradition is the lady is married. Okay, so he realizes he screwed everything up. He's never going to see her again. He's never going to touch her again. All that, okay? He was 3:37, all alone in a chamber, anxious, distraught. He keeps calling her out, calling on her name, whatever signals he needs to get her to come, and she doesn't come. Okay? He begs 100 times for her to have pity on him. She doesn't come. It's a wonder, the poet tells us, he does not kill himself. So, the men come from the king, 3:52, and they say he has to go to the court, not legal court, not Camelot's, not Hrothgar's, Arthur's court at Carlisle. Because the king had sent for him, because the queen had accused him. Lanval goes there in his great sorrow. What's again the cause of his great sorrow? He can't make the fairy queen show up. That's probably the top of it. There might be a secondary great sorrow. Yeah, he realizes he's got to pay the piper now. He said really bad stuff about the queen. And I should throw out, in an awful lot of medieval literature, Guinevere will pretty much sleep with anything that moves. I mean, she has a very, very bad reputation. There's another version of this story called Sir Lanval. And in this one, just very, very brief version of it, Arthur and his knights are sitting around the round table having a drinking game. Okay? And a magic horn is produced, drinking horn, so like a ram's horn. And the game involves, they have to make a boast about their wives/lovers, assuming there's one wife, one lover, not wife and lover, okay? And then they drink. If the boast they make about their wife or lover isn't true, then they'll drip a little. Even if they put the horn right up to their mouth, some of it's going to spill out. So they're going around the table. Arthur the horn comes to Arthur, and it's like before he can even get the horn to his mouth, the liquid's just like a fire hose. Because he's made an oath about Guinevere being the most faithful, the most honest, the most true, the most chaste, the most. Only thing he doesn't say is the most lecherous, the most licentious, the most loose, the most whatever. Okay? Back to this one. So he comes before the king. He's sad. He's silent. He's unspeaking. And the king says, "Vassal, you have done me a great wrong." Why? Anything Lanval says about the queen, what? Well, not only offends the king, it also applies to him. Just like anything you do for your king or anything you do as a knight, it affects your reputation of the king. We have the same idea in modern business today. You do a crappy job, that reflects on your boss. And it reflects on her boss, etc. So, you began to base 364, to base a suit, to shame and revile me and insult the queen. You boasted foolishly. Now, what is Arthur assuming? He's wrong. He can't prove this. Your beloved is far too exalted when her maid is more beautiful and worthy than the queen. Now, he did say that. He also said his beloved is more exalted and more beautiful than the queen. That's what he said first. And then he said, and in matter of fact, the lowest of her lowest maids is, notice Arthur's not, it's kind of like, well, maybe your lover is more exalted and more beautiful, but you said the maid, so we're going to go with that one, right? Lanval denies it. He denies the dishonor, we're told, in shame of his Lord, word by word, just as he said it. That is, he repeats what Arthur says and says, not true, not true, not true, not true. And then he's going to give the real version. He didn't request the queen's love, because that was part of the accusation. In other words, he goes back to the very beginning of the encounter. He didn't go looking for her, she came looking for him. But he acknowledged the truth of what he had said. So he goes back to the beginning. No, I didn't seek her out, she sought me out. I didn't try to rape her, she tried to rape me. But everything I said, yeah, I stand by that. 100%, all true. Has he seen the lowest of her handmaidens, by the way? From what we were told? No, but the implication is he spent several hours there, and maybe the lowest of the handmaidens, the chamber pot girl, comes in and empties, the chamber pot that's been there overnight. He is distressed, for he has lost her. One of the reasons, kind of implied, that he go ahead and fesses up to everything is, I'm dead anyways. Not dead because Arthur's going to kill him, but I may as well be dead because my love is gone. He will never see her. That's what happens when you fall in love with a fairy. Concerning this, he says, I'll do whatever you want. You want my life? Go ahead, take it. It's not worth anything anymore. The king's furious. He sends for all his men. That is, he sends for the knights of the round table. Why? They're going to do the judgment. It's not where the king has final say. To rightly say what he must do about this, that is, the knights are to give advice so that no one can blame him. No one can say, Arthur went off on an angry tear, you know. Yes?
But the knights hate him.
Say that again?
But the knights hate him. They're so
Well,
violent.
apparent. Do they now? What happened after he met the fairy queen?
Yeah, they were jealous.
His bank account went from zilch to X billion. He starts buying stuff for people. He throws the language of the poem, he throws a really good table every night, and everyone's welcome. He helps the poor. He does all that stuff of the Pentecost oath. Okay? So it's kind of like he's bought some friends, as it were. I mean that facetiously, okay? Obviously. So, they did what he ordered. Notice, whether they liked it or not. That implies that whether they liked it or not, they don't want to do this. They like Lanval now, seemingly. They decide he needs to have his day in court. He needs an opportunity to prove his case, to present witnesses. But he has to provide guarantees that he will await his judgment and return to his presence. That is, he has to go find a bail bondsman that will essentially post bail. All right? Who's that going to be? It's going to be the hero of our next poem, Sir Gawain. Sir Gawain is the only one who offers to do that. He becomes the guarantee. What does that mean? If Lanval skips town, the judgment will fall on Sir Gawain. Okay? So they tell the king what their judgment is. He demands guarantees. Lanval was alone and in great distress. So Sir Gawain offers.
So he ran in that class twice now.
So Gawain stands as surety, and the king says, okay, he's in your hands, it's up to you, etc. Lanval goes off to his lodging. The knights go along with him. They rebuke him. They counsel him, we're told, 408. Not to be in such sorrow. They curse mad love. Notice, mad love. What does mad mean here? It's not angry. It's crazy. Lunatic love. Why? Because love makes you do crazy things. They go see him every day. They ask him how he is, etc. So, the day comes that the court is going to convene. 4:16, the nobles all gathered. The king and queen are there, probably in slightly bigger seats around the round table. Actually, the round table's at Camelot, so it's not here. It's not movable, by the way, because if you're going to seat 120 people, that's a big table.
What's the court that they're at currently?
Carlisle, yeah. Northwest England, almost on the border between England and Scotland. And we were told at the beginning, it's because they're keeping the Picts and Scots out of Britain. It's not England at this time. So, everyone's sad for him because they all know he's going to die. They know what the judgment will be if he can't produce sufficient evidence, let's say. The poet says, line 420, I believe there were some 100 there who would have done anything in their power to free him without a trial. They'd have tried to get him off somehow. He was very wrongly accused. Now, is that the poet saying he was very wrongly accused, or is that those who would try to get him away somehow? It's probably the latter. And I think there's a reason why they think that. Guinevere's reputation. Arthur, by the way, in most of the medieval literature, most of the Arthurian literature, Arthur's not this young, handsome 24 or 25-year-old guy with Guinevere being similar age or maybe younger. Arthur's usually more like 40s, 50s, my age, 60s. And Guinevere's 18, 19, 20. Okay? Probably one of the reasons why, she's stepping out, let's say. King asked for the charges to be resaid. Okay? And then it's time for the nobles to make their decision. They go and sit in judgment, we're told. Some of them want to find him guilty, some according to their lord's wishes. In other words, they want to be on the good side of Arthur. Count of Cornwall says, we've got to do this. King has spoken. Only one who accuses him is the king. Well, Guinevere, obviously. That is, none of the nobles accuse Lanval. All right? So they keep deliberating. They're talking about what's going to happen to him. He's going to be bound by oath, etc. And they essentially give him a little bit more time. They give him time to round up witnesses. Okay? So they tell him what he has to do. And he says, line 465, that he cannot do that. He would never get any help from her. So they go back to the judges. They say, he can't produce said woman, The king urges them on, I want judgment. Why? Because Guinevere's probably back there going, speaking in his ear. And 471, just as they were about to give their verdict, top of the next column, they saw two maidens coming on two beautiful, brisk palfreys. They were extremely lovely. That's the maidens, not the horses. They were dressed in nothing but purple taffeta. Costly, expensive at that time, down to their bare skin. Everyone gazes at them eagerly. Why? Everyone's thinking, this is them. These are the lowest of the low. And they're what? Extremely lovely. Gawain and 3 knights with them, they go to Lanval. They ask him, one of these your beloved? Notice, either one, just say yes. They give him a door, go through the door. What's being suggested, by the way? Either one of these two is more beautiful than Guinevere. Lanval says, no, don't know who those are. Never seen them before. These aren't the two that came to him when he was taking a nap in the meadow. Those two were also described as lovely, kind of beyond belief. He doesn't know where they're come from or where they're going. The maidens go on along. They get down in front of the dais where King Arthur was sitting. What does that mean? They get down in front of the dais. Okay, so in a hall, everybody's sitting down here, and then you have a raised platform, and the nobles, the king, the queen, and such are sitting up here. If you go to any college in Oxford today, I've spoken at a couple different places, and at one of them, the speakers got to sit on the dais with the master of the college. And everybody else is sitting down here. If you've seen the Harry Potter films, think the Great Hall in Hogwarts where you've got 4 long tables, one for each school, and then all the teachers and such are sitting up here. So Arthur's sitting up here. What does it mean they get down in front of that? They ride their horses into the hall, right up to the table. Generally kind of frowned on to take horses inside buildings, because horses do things.
Is the implication that they, like the people and the knights and everyone who's on Lanval's side, do they believe him? Or are they just like, here's an out, dude, it doesn't matter what you did? It's kind of unclear.
I think some do. I don't think it's clear that they all do. Bear in mind, we're told some kind of side with Arthur because you don't want to get on the bad side of the king. But I think there's also that thing going on in the background that they know Guinevere's character. But you got to admit, everything Lanval said, as he repeated, it's hard to believe that her lowest maidservant could be more beautiful than Guinevere. Leave Guinevere's moral character out. She's a knockout. She's a swimsuit model, if they had swimsuits, all right? No, not them, not her. The maids go along, they get down in front of the dais. They were very beautiful. Now we've been told that twice. And spoke courteously, King, have your chambers made ready and hung with silks where my lady can dismount. Notice, my lord, we are here to ask you. It's not what they say. King, have your chambers made ready. Come on, get to it. Move. Hang silks on them. Why? Not your normal tapestries that are going to be hung on the walls inside a castle. You hang tapestries inside a castle because castles are very drafty. They block the wind. No, silk. The finest material you can find. Why? My lady, they're both speaking, wants to dismount here and take lodging with you. That is, my lady's going to ride right where we are. She's going to dismount, and she wants to sleep in one of your chambers, one of your rooms for the evening. Okay? He says, okay. He has rooms made ready. He calls 2 knights. They lead the 2 women up to the chambers. They don't say anything else after that. Okay? King, all right, let's get back to business. You guys ready? Arthur's a little slow. And they start to talk again. We stopped deliberating when these 2 gorgeous women came riding down, the street and such. See, where were we? And they start talking again. 2 more women come riding down the street. Of noble bearing, dressed in cool silks. They ride 2 Spanish mules. The vassals were delighted by this. Delighted. What does that probably mean? Wow. So the first 2 were beautiful. These 2 are even more beautiful. They say to each other, Lanval saved. One of these has got to be her. Her, meaning the queen, not the lowest of the low. So, Yvain, known widely from other Arthurian literature, takes his companion, says, we got to go tell Lanval. Lanval says, no, not her. Never seen him before. Just then the maidens arrive. They dismount also, so they ride their horses into the hall. They get down in front of the king. Many people gave notice. 529. Many people gave great praise to their bodies. Poet emphasizes that first. To their bodies, faces, and coloring. Skin coloring, not their clothing. Both of them were certainly worth more than the queen ever was. That doesn't mean both of them together. It means each one of them. The elder was courteous and wise, and she speaks to Arthur. King, provide rooms for us in order to receive my lady. In other words, we know 2 have already come in. Those aren't going to be enough rooms. Why does she need now, apparently, 4 rooms? One of the marks of the wealth, power, stature, etc. of a lord or king or queen is the size of their retinue, of their entourage. Okay? You can be a queen or king, queen, whichever, of a little podunk kingdom and have, one retainer. That indicates you're not much of a king. Or you can be like Arthur and you can have 120 knights, each of which is in charge of other knights, indicating he's very powerful, his renown is great. We need more rooms. More people are coming. He orders they be taken to the others who arrived earlier. They did not need to worry about the mules. He sends them off back to the matter at hand. Okay? As the nobles are about to decide, 547, they were about to take a decision when through the town they saw a maiden come riding on a horse. In all the world, there was none more beautiful. She rode a white palfrey. Why white? Purity. Which carried her well and gently. That is, this is a very well-trained horse. No jostling. She rode a white palfrey, which carried her well and gently. It had a well-shaped, this is the horse, not her, though there is going to be weird descriptions of women in this and Sir Gawain of the Green Knight. It had a well-shaped neck and head. There was no handsomer animal under heaven. So, this is the greatest horse that has ever lived, seemingly. The palfrey was, and we get description of how the horse is decked out. Richly harnessed, no counter king under heaven could have afforded the whole thing without selling or mortgaging land. Okay, no counter king obviously includes whom? King Arthur. She, the lady on the horse, was dressed in this manner, in a shift of white linen. Shift, the old French chemise, like a nightie, okay? Lost my place, which let both her sides be seen. So it goes down the front, it goes down the back, and it's open down the sides. As it was laced on either side. Not lace, but like a lacing. She had a lovely body, a long waist. It's one of those descriptions I'm not quite sure. I don't even want to attempt to draw this. A long waist, a neck whiter than snow on a branch. Why snow on a branch? Why not snow on the ground?
Because snow on the ground gets stepped on.
It gets stepped on. Animals, dogs, make it no longer white snow. All those ideas. Pure, virginal snow. What else? Sparkling eyes, white skin, a beautiful mouth, well-formed nose, dark eyebrows, and a lovely forehead and curling golden hair. No golden thread cast such a gleam as did her hair in the sun. It's like her hair, it's like gold foil in terms of how it casts the light of the sun out. Her mantle was dark purple. Why? It's the color of royalty. Okay? That's a way old. I mean, that goes back to pre-Homer. It's in the Old Testament and such. Why it takes a particular kind of shellfish in order to create the color purple. She had wrapped her mantle was dark purple. She had wrapped its ends around her. She had a sparrowhawk on her fist, another sign of royalty, okay? And a greyhound, another sign of royalty behind her. No one in the town, great or small, not the old nor the children, who did not go to look at her. This might be, some have suggested that this could be Marie de France's, I'll do it over here, take on the tale of Lady Godiva. Okay? Anglo-Saxon queen. She really lived, real person, who was married to a man named Leverage, Leofric, same name, totally different guy, same name as the bishop who we know was the Bishop of Exeter Cathedral when the Exeter manuscript was donated. Okay? Different guy though. Leverage was a king in Mercia, the Midlands of Anglo-Saxon England. She was his queen, etc. He was trying to raise taxes, charging the people too much. The legend primarily comes from or is centered around that's an R, the town of Coventry in the middle of England. She kept telling him, you got to quit raising taxes on the people. And he said, the only way I'm going to stop raising taxes is if you run through the center of town naked. And she's like, okay. She's doing this for the people. She's not doing it because she's an exhibitionist, okay? She sends word she's well loved by the people, by the way. She sends word to the people what she's going to do, and she asks them to turn away, to hide, to not look. And she gets buck naked and she rides on her horse through the middle of town, and her husband's like, damn girl, I never thought you'd do that. And he doesn't raise the taxes, okay? Some have suggested this is her take on that, but it's kind of a reversal. Notice she's not naked, and everybody runs to the windows and to the street to take a look at her. So, back to, as they saw her pass, line 579 now, there was no joking about her beauty. It's almost like her beauty is something sacred that you shouldn't even kid about. She came along quite slowly. That is, she's moving slowly so everybody can get a look. Why? Proof. She's there for a reason. The judges who saw her, 581, considered it a great marvel. That is, seeing her right through this town, this is a marvel. What is a marvel?
Something miraculous.
It's not something that happens very often. It's not like, a 500-year flood. It is a miraculous, supernatural, never to be expected to happen again kind of a thing. There was not one who looked at her who did not grow warm with true joy. It's like she fills them with pleasure and happiness. The true joy, however, is probably they all look at her and go, oh yeah, Lanval's getting off free. There's no way anyone's going to convict. Those who loved the knight came to him. They told him about the maiden who was coming, who, if it pleased God, would set him free. They said, come take a look. Here is one who is not tawny, tanned, nor dark. I'm from California. Beach Boys songs, California girl. Tanned. What's wrong with being tanned? Okay, but what does it indicate? You're out in the sun a lot. Which means you're either working in the field or you're working the streets. In Shakespeare's day, it implies you're a hooker. You're a streetwalker. That's why you have a tan. Okay? She's the loveliest in the world of all the women who live. That's it. Lanval's free. Lanval heard this. He lifts his head. The implication is like he's almost leaning up, slouched down against the wall. And he can kind of lift up and look over like that because he's full of despair. And he looks over and goes, yes. And we're told the blood rose to his face. He was pale before. Why? All the blood had drained. He knew, I'm about to die. He was very quick to speak. It is my beloved. Now I care little who may kill me. They can kill me now. I'm happy. Why? Has he spoken to her? No. Has she run up and said, oh, my Lanval? Nope. He's gotten to see her, and that was enough. I care little who may kill me if she does not take pity on me, for I am cured when I see her. This is like a 13-year-old in love. All I need, as long as I can see her, I'll be happy. Okay? She enters the palace. Such a beauty had never come there. So take Guinevere and all of her ladies in waiting and count them all together. They don't come close. She dismounts before the king so that she could easily be seen by all. There might be some innuendo and double entendre there, so that when she gets off the horse, she can be seen by all. Okay? She lets her mantle fall so that they could see her better. And the king, we're told, who was very well bred, got up to meet her. When the other ladies come in, the implication is Arthur stays in his seat. What is a rule, so to speak, of the other day? Of courtesy. What do men do when a woman enters the room? Rise. Great example of this. What is the name of that movie? Antonio Banderas teaches dance. School in Harlem? I think it's Harlem. Based on a real story, by the way, about this guy who did this. Of course, the guy wasn't Antonio Banderas back when he was really hot. And he's waiting to interview with this high school principal. Alfre Woodard is the actress who plays the high school principal. And he's waiting, and these various women teachers and secretaries come in, and every time a woman enters the outer office, he's popping up and down. And there's this black kid sitting next to him, in trouble with the principal again. He's like, dude, what are you doing? And he's like, when a woman enters, as he says in his fantastic Spanish accent, when a woman enters the room, a gentleman stands up, he's like, dude, just get her number. That's what you want. And he can't believe what this kid just said. Watch the movie. Dance with Me. Look it up. It's a great, great film. So, Arthur gets up, showing his courtesy. And we're told, and all the others honored her and offered themselves to serve her. That is, they offer themselves as vassals to her. That's what that means, offered to serve her. When they had looked at her well and greatly praised her beauty, 6:11-12, she spoke in this way. Why? She doesn't wish to delay. She's on a time schedule. But the first 4 ladies who came in said, she wants to spend the night in your chamber tonight. Not his chamber, but a chamber in his castle. King, I have fallen in love with one of your vassals. There he is, Lanval. He was accused in your court. How does she know? Did Lanval send messages? I mean, we know he called out to her more than 100 times and no answer. I do not wish it to be held against him. That is, what he said shouldn't be held against him. Concerning what he said, you should know that the queen was wrong. He never asked for her love. Lanval said that, and now she has said that. Here's why that's important. In biblical justice, it takes 2 witnesses to make an accusation. The queen was one witness. She didn't have anybody else, and yet Arthur acted on it. Now we have Lanval saying, queen's a liar, and we have whoever she is saying, queen's a liar. And concerning the boast he made, if he can be acquitted by me, have your nobles set him free. If I am enough to prove what he said to be true, let him go. We're told, the king says, well, it's not my decision, it's up to the nobles. Whatever they judge. there is not one who does not judge that Lanval has completely won his case. Imagine what that has to. Imagine what Guinevere is going to say to them after Lanval and the lady leave. He is freed by their decision, and the maiden takes her leave. The king could not keep her. Why? The king could not. Why would the poet say the king could not keep her? What does that imply? He wanted to. Please stay the night or a year. You know. She had enough people to serve her. That's kind of implying the king offered himself to serve her. Outside the hall was set a great block of dark marble where heavy men mounted. That is, where men in armor would get on that block so that they could then get onto her horse. In the later Middle Ages, like 1300s, 1400s, when men would go to fight in jousts with the lances and all that kind of stuff, if they were wearing full armor, they had to be hoisted up onto their horses because the armor, the full armor, which covered head to toe, literally, every part of your body was covered in armor, all right? Weighed a couple 100 pounds. That's why you get knocked off your horse, you can't get up. You're like a turtle on its shell. So, Lanval climbed up on this block. When the maiden came through the gate with one leap, Lanval jumped on the palfrey behind her. That is, she got up on the horse first. Lanval leaps up onto the horse, and with her he went to Avalon. So the Bretons tell us, to a very beautiful island. You've got a gloss. Isle of Avalon is often associated with the Celtic other world. Jump to the end of Arthur's life. In Le Morte d'Arthur, Arthur dies in a battle with his son/nephew. Just work it out. And when he does, let me rephrase that, Arthur is mortally wounded in a battle with his son/nephew, Mordred. And he's taken off by the fairies to the Isle of Avalon in one of the versions. Okay? Why? To die there? No. He's at Avalon, according to this version of the myth, still, where he is being healed. And Arthur will return to Britain when it has its greatest need. So, the Battle of Britain in 1941, or 1940, that wasn't its greatest need. It's coming, apparently at some time. And when it does, according to the myth, Arthur will come back from Avalon. Who does he sound like? This is the idea behind Tolkien's The Return of the King. The Messiah. The Return of the King. It's all the stuff tied together. Pardon? Jesus. Okay, it's the Return of the King. Incarnation was the first advent, first coming. Christians look forward to the second advent, the second coming. Okay? And we're told, no one ever heard another word of him, and I can tell no more. That's it. That's the end of the story. Okay? Again, this is one of many tales of the Celtic otherworld and fairies coming from the other world. This is about the only one that is really entirely positive. That is, Lanval willingly goes off. There are others where people are carried off and then they come back. A great one, 19th century, John Keats. Stop doing that, Ed. La Belle Dame Sans Merci. The Beautiful Woman Without Mercy. And it's about a knight who meets up with a fairy. Great, great lyric poem. Okay? All right, that's it for Lanval and, Lanval and Marie de France. So now we're gonna jump up a few hundred years, a couple hundred years. So that's written sometime, late mid 12th century, Henry II, 1154 to 1189, sometime in that time frame. We don't have an exact date. When we jump to Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, we're getting to the end of the 14th century. All right? So, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, written probably right around 1375. It's not much earlier than that, because the armor that it describes dates, some of it can be very closely dated to like 10-year periods, to right around this time period, 1375. We know within about a 30 to 50 mile diameter, the area of England it's written in, and it's northwest Midlands, with, if you draw a circle with Chester at its center, the town of Chester, okay, take 15-mile radius, so a 30-mile diameter, that's the area that produced this poem. All based on dialect, all right? J.R.R. Tolkien did an edition of the poem. No one was better at pinpointing dialects and such than Tolkien was in the 20s and early 30s, okay? He's the one who posits in his edition, probably Chester, all right? It's part of what's called the alliterative revival, which began around 1350 and ended around 1375. Bunch of poems in the alliterative revival. I had written down up here the other day at the top, the alliterative Mort d'Arthur. Big, long poem written in the alliterative style. It's called the alliterative revival because it's thought the practitioners of it were trying to revive the Anglo-Saxon alliterative practice. Remember all those rules that spent one day? There had like 8 of them written down over here. The only problem is these folks didn't know those rules. They didn't know them at all. Here's an example. One of the greatest works of the alliterative revival is The Vision of Piers Plowman by a guy named Lawman. Okay? And in that poem, you have this line. In a fair field full folk found. That's 5 alliterating sounds. Would never happen in Anglo-Saxon. In Anglo-Saxon, at most, you had 3 alliterating syllables that contained the stress. The 4th one never did. Okay? And this goes on, this kind of practice, line after line after line after line. It gets really repetitive and boring. And some of these poems go on for 1,000 and more lines. Okay? Sir Gawain and the Green Knight doesn't do it as much. It does do it. It's also, the dialect of Northwest Midlands. We're going to read some Chaucer, and I don't remember if the Chaucer is in Middle English or not. Yes, it is. The Chaucer selections are in Middle English, okay? Sir Gawain and the Green Knight's in Middle English, but if D.C., Washington, D.C., American English were the quote-unquote standard, this version of English would be like version spoken in some of the hills and hollers of Appalachia and or North Georgia or South Georgia, etc. Okay? It's Woodbury English compared to, let's even make it even more stark. It's Woodbury English compared to the King's English. She's dead, I keep forgetting. She was alive my whole life. The King's English. I'll bet you if King Arthur, not King Philip either, King Charles, if he were to come to U.S. and visit Woodbury, he'd probably go, what's he saying? Yeah, it'd be like if one of us go to Glasgow. Glaswegian English is almost unintelligible to anybody who is not from Glasgow. Our kids one summer did a soccer camp, and we had a guy in from Glasgow, and I'm like, what? Could barely understand him, other than go, run, kick, etc. Okay? So, often hard to understand. We have no idea who the author is. The manuscript that contains this poem, or preserves it, is Cotton Nero A10. Remember Beowulf? Cotton Vitellius A15. So it was in Sir Robert Bruce Cotton's library. He had this one on the bookcase that had a bust of Nero. I kind of think I would have skipped over Nero. Had a habit of burning things, like his library. Nero, top shelf, 10th item in, right? This manuscript contains several poems. So down in the Green Knight is one, Purity, Pearl. This is also sometimes called Cleanness, and there's one I'm drawing a blank on. The poet who writes, Sir Gawain of the Green Knight. Sir Gawain of the Green Knight, Pearl, Purity. There's another one that I'm drawing a complete blank with. The poet who probably wrote all of these is called one of two things. The Gawain poet or the Pearl poet. Okay? Nobody reads this in the fourth one. It's going to come to me. Not in class, I'm positive. The poem Pearl features a man who has a vision. And the vision is of his dead daughter, whose name is Pearl. And in the vision, he sees her on the other side of a stream. The entire thing is an allegory. She's named Pearl because of the parable of the pearl of great price that he has lost. How did he lose it? Because she died. And it's all about how does he get to her? In other words, how do you live your life in order to attain heaven, to get to heaven? Because that's where she is. She's on the other river. She's on the other side of the Jordan. She's on the right, the appropriate side of the Jordan. He's on the bad side of the Jordan, meaning down here in the crap of life, and he's got to get to there, right? Very, as I said, very allegorical. This is all about what it sounds like. Purity, clean, how to be pure, how to be clean, how to be free from sin, all that kind of stuff. So Gawain of the Green Knight, it kind of fits the thematic elements of the others. We'll talk about it, okay? One other comment about Sir Gawain and the Green Knight before we get into it. Hopefully we'll get to this today. The thing about the pentacle. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight has a bunch of different elements to it. Part of it comes from Celtic tradition. Okay? This thing of these three games, so to speak, that comes from a Celtic text. Your textbook mentions it, called Bricrew's Feast. That's Beowulf. One page. I'm not going to talk about the introduction. Please read it though. And you've got other elements. It plays upon the fiction that the Brits come from a guy named Brutus, son/grandson of Aeneas from Virgil's Aeneid. Aeneas was a son of Priam of Troy. Okay, so what does that make the British? Trojans. It's kind of weird when you think about it. They create this fiction that they're Trojans. Wouldn't you rather be among the Greeks? Because the Trojans lost. Troy is no longer anywhere. You can go to the ruins. There's multiple layers of Troy and such. But anyways, there's this fiction that they're the descendants of Troy. That's why it begins, part 1, page 226. When the siege and the assault were ended at Troy, the city laid waste, burnt into ashes. The man who had plotted the treacherous scheme tried for the whole trickery, blah, 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 blah. It was princely Aeneas, and he leaves. He goes to Carthage. He meets up with a woman, the queen of Carthage, named Dido, and we get one of the great love stories in the Western tradition. Why? Because after he has an affair with her and leaves her brokenhearted, she kills herself. I think I've mentioned it here. Book written in the 40s, 1940s. Might have been in the Shakespeare class that I mentioned it, Love in the Western World. All about romantic love. Literary romantic love. Okay? Literary romantic love has at its heart the Liebestod, which means, down here, love, death. The love death. Name a classic love story. All you had to read this in junior high or high school. Why was that inflicted on you at that age? I have no idea. Other than that, they're both 13 years old or something like that. Okay? Utterly ridiculous. Romeo and Juliet. Why? Because they kill each other for love. Do they really kill each other for love? No, they kill each other because they're stupid in their adolescence. And they don't realize the other one's not dead.
They didn't pay attention.
Okay? What's another one? Antony and Cleopatra. Okay? Same thing. Not teenagers anymore. The opposite of teenagers. They're on the downward slide of life. Antony's probably about my age. All his glory days are gone. Okay? Same with Cleopatra's. They kill each other. Take that back. Each kills each self. They don't kill each other. What else? Arthurian. Tristan and Isolde. Great, great, great. It's one of the greatest of their Arthurian tales. It is really a star-crossed tale. Tristan is commanded by King Lot to go win Isolde for my hand. King Lot's king of Cornwall. The marriage has essentially been arranged. He goes, she falls in love with him, she rescues him because his ship runs aground or something, rescues him, he falls in love with her, not knowing who she is. And then he finds out she's the person he is supposed to bring back to Cornwall to marry his lord, which he does. I mean, they have an affair while he's still in Ireland with her, brings him back, breaks the affair off. They're caught when she comes to him once, and end of story, kind of. I won't give you the rest. How about Arthur and Guinevere? Just then, where's the love tale? Lancelot, Arthur's right-hand man, his greatest warrior, falls in love with Guinevere. Okay? And in most versions, Arthur dies in battle, Lancelot goes off to a monastery, Guinevere goes off to a convent and live their lives in religious chaste, devotion later on. What about another one? Any of you read Dante? Dante's Divine Comedy. You've got two lovers. It's one of the greatest stories, and it's based on a true event. Paolo and Francesca, who are in the whirlwind of lust for all eternity. Why? Because they were caught making love And she's married, if I remember right, to Paolo's brother. He catches them, to use the Italian, in flagrante, in the act, and runs a sword through them both. Okay? How did they fall in love? Her husband would spend time away, and they would start reading tales of love. About knights and ladies falling in love. And as they're reading, they start looking at each other and they start looking into each other's eyes. Remember what we talked about the other day? Don't make eye contact, because those eye beams are shooting out and you get involved with eye sex. And eye sex is going to lead to real sex, okay? This, talks about, at one point, tales of love and languishment. Keats writes another poem, to one who has been long in city pent, that is, to one who's been stuck in the city. Talking about late 1790s, very early 19th century, 1800s London, covered with smoke and soot and all that kind of crap. And it's about somebody who gets to go off to probably Hampstead Heath and lay down in the grass and look at the beautiful blue eye of heaven. Why? No smog, no pollution. And reads tales of love, debonair tales of love and languishment. That is, and just thinks, oh, if only I could find love. Okay? So, following all these, what do they all end in? Death. It's a romantic death. It's not a Nietzschean suicidal, reed catcher in the rye and you want to blow your brains out kind of a death. So much for realist literature, in my opinion. So, Britain gets founded by Aeneas and his followers. Felix Brutus, line 13. And we're told, moving up to the present, so to speak, not our present, but the present within the tale, the speaker says, 25, but of all those who dwelt there, that is, all the kings of Britain, Arthur was always judged noblest, as I have heard tell. And so an actual adventure I mean to relate, which some men consider a marvelous event. So, if it is a marvelous event, then it has an element of what? The marvelous, supernatural, miraculous, etc. Time is at 9:42. And a prodigious happening among tales about Arthur. So, listen for a little while. This poem's almost 3,000 lines long. It's not a little while if you were to sit in a hall and listen to it. The king spent 37 that Christmas at Camelot, with many gracious lords, men of great worth. This is telling us, one, what about Arthur? By this time, roughly 1375, Arthur's considered to be what? Christian. That's why he's spending Christmas. All right? Many gracious lords, etc. They're at the round table, there's rich revelry, there's amusement, etc. Okay? The knights fight in jousting tournaments. This is play jousting, they're not killing each other. There's food and everything, dancing at night, joy resounding in the halls. With line 50, with all of life's best, they spent that time together, the most famous warriors in Christendom, and the loveliest ladies who ever drew breath, blah, blah, blah. 60. When New Year was so fresh that it had hardly begun, probably implies New Year's Day or the day after, double helpings of food were served on the dais that day. The king with all his knights entered the hall when the service in the chapel came to an end. Why? In the older Christian tradition, there was a service done on New Year's Day. The service was to celebrate the crucifixion, not the crucifixion, not the baptism and, what's the word I want? Circumcision, not crucifixion. The first shedding of Christ's blood is the reason why that is celebrated. Okay, it's probably that's being alluded to. And we're told, so they take their places in the hall, and we get how people are seated. Now, they're not seated around the round table at this point. They're seated like, I had idea of the hall over here. So Arthur and the nobles are at the high table, the dais, and we get their places given. The noblest knights in a higher seat, as seen proper, 74. Queen Guinevere, gaily dressed, placed in the middle, seated on the upper level, adorned all about. Fine silk, that is, she is adorned with fine silk, surrounding her, a canopy overhead, costly French fabric, silk carpets underfoot that are embroidered and all that kind of stuff. She is the loveliest to see. She's glancing around with eyes blue-gray. Arthur would not eat, we're told, till a couple of things happened. 85 and following. Arthur would not eat until everyone was served. He was so lively in his youth. That's implying this Arthur is young. This isn't an old, tired Arthur. And he's also a little boyish. He hankered after an active life. Busy guy. He's just always doing something. Cared very little to spend time lying or sitting. Okay? So, he also made a point of honor. Line 91. He would never eat on a day like this until he had been told a curious tale about some perilous thing. So notice, he won't eat until everyone else is served. Right? So the people in the very back get served. Arthur won't eat until their plates are all full. According to this, what does that also mean? Who takes the first bite?
Nobody else eats
Until Arthur or probably Guinevere. Because Arthur is metaphorically vassal to her. Husband's supposed to lay down his life for his wife. Ephesians, etc. So, that means the people who were served the first, way in the back, their food's all cold. By the time Arthur eats. Or takes his first bite. But, he also won't eat until some wondrous tale is told. We're told. Or, 3, some great wonder that he could believe of princes or battles or other marvels. Or, some knights beg Arthur for a jousting opponent. So, everybody's got to be served. He wants to hear some marvelous, wonderful tale, or he wants to hear some other kind of tale that he can believe in, or there has to be some kind of jousting or juggling or, wrestling match or something. This was the king's custom. At each splendid feast. So, he's standing up, and we get the description of who else is sitting there. There's good Gawain, seated beside Guinevere, and Agravain, Ledour, etc., sitting there, and Baldwin and Yvain and all these others. All right? First course is brought in. Notice, the requirements haven't been met yet. He hasn't heard a tale, he hasn't seen a wonder, nobody's jousted and such. So, first course is brought in, and the same time that the first course is brought in, the doors at the end of the hall burst open, 136, and a terrible figure comes in. Tallest on earth. Big boy. From the waist to the neck, so thick-set and square, and his loins and his limbs so massive and long. In truth, half a giant, I believe he was. That's not the most amazing thing. He's sitting on a horse, a very big horse. Both his belly and his waist were becomingly trim. In other words, he's ripped. His hue astonished them. Line 147 said in his look so keen, for boldly he rode in, completely emerald green. It doesn't mean he's wearing emerald green, though he is, wearing green. It means his skin is green. His hair is green. Everything about him's green. One of the big issues in this poem, going back at least 100 years, is why? Why is he a green man? What's this symbolism of the Green Knight?
Is this where they get the Jolly Green Giant?
Possible. I don't know the history of that fairy tale story. Possible. Could be. What most have suggested is the source for this is the idea of the green man in British culture. You go to any church that survives from the late Middle Ages, and you'll be able to find somewhere in that church, or you go to almost any of the colleges in Oxford or Cambridge, and you'll find an image of the green man, or a green man, which is a face surrounded by leaves and twigs and branches. Okay? Probably based on a Celtic god, a wild god, okay? But also a god that can be helpful if one is lost in the woods and things like that. Other ideas, it's a fertility thing, it's a spring, manifestation, it's agriculture, etc. All arrayed in green, etc. Okay? A big, long description of him. We're not going to talk about the description. He's attractive, though, even though he's green. Long description. Why? Why does the poet spend so much time in describing the knight, describing his horse, later on describing Sir Gawain's shield, describing Sir Gawain's armor and such? Who's the poem intended for? Who's the intended audience? Who? No?
Common people?
Just the opposite, the upper class. In fact, we're going to see after the first hunt, during the first hunt, when the deer is caught, take that back, when the deer is killed, we're going to see the slaughtering of a deer. And we're going to read about its innards becoming its outards, the whole 9 yards. Why? Because the peasant working the field, who very seldom has venison, is not going to be moved by those descriptions. The people who are going to be moved by those descriptions, the descriptions of the kind of clothing these people are wearing, just like with Lanval, the description of the queen's clothing and her canopy and her pavilion and all that, are going to be people who are somewhat familiar with that. The upper class, the rich, the wealthy, etc. The people who would be sitting in a hall listening to a minstrel or a troubadour telling this kind of story. So, keeps going on, the description, and then the Green Knight finally speaks, line 224. So from when the Green Knight comes in, 135, almost 100 lines are just to describe everything about the Green Knight and his horse. Okay? What is one telling characteristic other than him being green? This guy's carrying a massive axe. The axe handle is massive. The axe blade is massive. The blade is described, that is the cutting part of it, from here to here is 4 feet long. That is a huge axe, okay? So, he rides up right to Arthur's spot on the dais and says, greeting none, but haughtily looking, 223, haughtily looking over their heads. The first words he spoke, where is the governor of this crowd? Who's in charge of this crowd? What does crowd imply? He should say, who is the king of this hall? Who is the king of this host? Crowd implies what? Like a mob. Exactly. Where is the governor of this crowd? Glad should I be to clap eyes on the man and exchange with him a few words. And he looks down at the knights as he rode up and down. It's like he rides up to Arthur. It can't be him. And he keeps riding down, and then he rides back down, and he might even ride down the other tables. Okay? A hallmark of medieval literature. A king can be spotted instantly. There is something about the king that says, neon flashing light, king. He looks Arthur in the face. Can't be. For long, there was only staring at him. They're totally flabbergasted. And then Arthur speaks. 250. Then Arthur confronts that wonder before the high table, salutes him politely. It doesn't mean he, this kind of salute. Just means addresses him politely. It says, Sir, welcome indeed to this place. I am master of this house. My name is Arthur. Notice, not dog, get down off that horse, I'm king. He gives his name last. He's showing some humility. Just like in Beowulf, when Beowulf introduces himself, he introduces himself as the son of Ecgtheow instead of, Beowulf am I called. So, I'm Arthur. It's almost like, nice to meet you, Settlespell. Be pleased to dismount, spend some time here. And what you have come for, we shall learn later. In other words, have some chow with us. He's very southern in that sense. Come on, I'll get some lemonade. Or iced tea, I should say. Never acquired the fancy for iced tea. No, by heaven. The Green Knight swears by heaven. What should that tell us about him? Possibly he's Christian, but he's definitely not what? He's not Satan. Satan would say, no, by the Almighty God, who I tried to overthrow. He wouldn't do that. This is important, by the way. And him who sits there. So not only by heaven, but by the one who sits, who reigns in heaven. Our Father who art in heaven. To spend time in this house was not the cause of my coming. I didn't come here to sit. But because your name is so highly regarded, and your city and your warriors reputed the best, dauntless in armor, dauntless. They cannot be cowed. They cannot have fear put into them. And on horseback afield, the most valiant, most excellent of all men, courageous as players in other noble sports. And here, courtesy is displayed. Courtesy is shown. What do you mean? What does he mean by that? The model of courtesy. This is the handbook of courtesy. All right? What's he building Arthur up to? Because so far, what has he said? Man, you're the greatest. You and all your men and all your ladies, the greatest ever were. That's what brought me here. You may be assured by this branch that I carry, I approach you in peace. What's he carrying? It's not an olive branch. It's a holly branch. Why? This is Celtic. If it were Judeo-Christian, Western literature, Greek, Roman, he'd be bearing an olive branch. Okay? I seek no battle. If I did come to fight, had I traveled in fighting dress in warlike manner, I have a hauberk at home, helmet too, shield, keen spear, shining bright, other weapons. They're not here. But since I look for no combat, I am not dressed for battle. In other words, he's not wearing any armor. Okay? But if you're as courageous as everyone says, what is that? That's a challenge. If you're as courageous as all the newspapers are saying, Arthur's like, if? What is this if you speak of? You will graciously grant me the game. The game, he says, that I asked for by right. One of the things that Arthur, one of the three qualifications A game, a jousting thing. How are games supposed to be played? Are people supposed to die in games? No, they're not. They're meant to pass the time. They're meant for enjoyment. It's stupid games like Russian roulette. Arthur, if you seek a combat without armor, you will not lack a fight. What did the Green Knight just say?
Like, I'm not here for a fight.
I'm not here for a fight. I'm not here for a battle. Is Arthur dense? I mean, he's IQ of 80 maybe? No. I seek no battle. I just said that. Hello. Why? Oh, this line. Those about me in this hall are but beardless children. Who are the beardless children? Name some. Gawain, Agravain, Yvain, Lancelot, the greatest knights the Christian world had known. And he says, you're like prepubescent boys. They're probably, if they had sidearms, reaching for the Glock, reaching for the Smith & Wesson. They're like, what did he say? If I were locked in my armor on a great horse, no one here could match me with their feeble powers. What's feeble? Weak. Therefore, I ask of the court a Christmas game. Why? It's Christmas time. Christmas, traditionally, wasn't a one-day affair. Nor did it begin on quote-unquote Black Friday. It began on Christmas Day and extended until January 6th, 12th night. The first day was the first day of gift giving. And every evening of that 12-day period was what? Full of revels. Okay? Let's have a revel, is what he's saying. It's Yule and New Year, and here are brave men and plenty. No, a little game. So here it is. If anyone in this hall, 285, thinks himself bold enough, so doughty, that is so studly, in body and reckless in mind. What does reckless mean? Literally the wreck in reckless. What does wreck mean? We don't use that as a verb anymore. I wreck that.
Like to reckon, like to be.
We use the word
without
reckon.
reason.
It means to consider, to think about. Reckless is to then be like heelak, thoughtless. Reckless is not thinking, not considering, not cogitating on. So, if anyone, so doughty in body, reckless in mind, as to strike a blow fearlessly and take one in return, I'll give him this marvelous battle axe. Look, you can have this. So, you get the first stroke. Yeah, I'll give you mine. You get the first stroke. You get to take a shot at me. Sounds like teenagers, right? You get to take a shot at me, but I get to give one back to you.
Who can will this?
Well, it's not necessarily. Okay, good point. Which might mean what? You're not going to win. But it's a game. Okay? I shall give him this marvelous gift as a battle axe, this ponderous axe. Use it as he wants. In fact, I'll take the first blow. Okay? If anyone is fierce enough to take up my challenge, if any of you beardless boys are man enough, and we're told, if he petrified them at first, even stiller were they then. Why? Are they quaking in their boots? Or are they just so astonished, literally it means turned to stone, that someone has said these words to them? What? Is this Arthur's house, 309? Why? No one has said, let me at him. You guys are supposed to be the paragons of manly virtue, of manly martial prowess. Come on. And now the men start, we're told, line 314, or he goes on and says, now the revelry and repute of the round table are overthrown with a word. Well, how did he hear about him? With a word. He's suggesting maybe all that reputation is nothing but hot air. Okay? And I know it's time to go. And Arthur says, no, you'll get your, I'll do it. But then Sir Gawain begs Arthur's leave to do it himself. Why? Before we go. Why does Sir Gawain say that? We're going to look at it again when we come back on Monday. Because he's the lowest of the low of Arthur's knighthood. It's what he says, at least. He says, I am the least. Uncle Arthur. Uncle Artie, let me do it. It's kind of the tenor of what we're being told here. All right, we'll stop there. And we will pick up 343. And we'll go a lot more quickly from here on. We won't finish on Monday. We'll finish on Wednesday of next week. I don't think we'll finish on Monday. Let me put it that way. No, there's no